if I brought a situation to her and had a conversation, whatever I got back was the opposite of relationship. It was the opposite of what should be said. It was the opposite of kind. I'm like, I'm in opposite world.
In a world of hurt and pain, we find a way to break the chain. A caring heart, a guiding light, will lead us through the darkest night. With preservation in our soul, we'll rescue those who've lost control, escape the grip of a narcissist on our journey to recovery bliss.
Padideh, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I have the privilege of being in studio with you again at Olus Media. So this is very exciting to actually do our podcast together live in person.
I know. It's wonderful. I got to have you move to Southern California. I mean, what do I have to do to get that happening in motion?
It's probably a bank account thing. I would guess the housing in Georgia, while it's doubled in price in the last couple of years, it's still not quite where we are in California. And the gasoline here is ridiculously expensive too. We're talking about like $5 a gallon versus $2.70.
And to that point, they're actually increasing gas July 1st.
Oh, isn't that nice?
They're putting a tax on it.
It's just like it was funny. We drove through downtown LA the other day, and I'm like, this looks, wow. It's a culture shock for me.
Yes. It's almost like a third world country.
It kind of felt that way. In fact, I visited Cape Town, South Africa, a couple of years ago with my best friend and his family, and there were some real similarities between the two. It was fascinating to me.
Wow. And I go downtown a lot, as you know, downtown LA, because that's the main court is downtown LA.
Yeah.
So so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Culture shock. And the other thing that I think I'd have a hard time adjusting to, I mean, Atlanta traffic is no gem either, but it doesn't generally take me an hour and a half to go 4 miles. So around here, it's like I could walk quicker in some of those places. So it's adjustment. So what are we talking about today, Padideh?
We're talking about recovery. So much of narcissists, and when you hear about narcissists, and it's such a downer, you know. It really is. It's like if you've been through a narcissistic relationship, you know, you're like, I know all these things. Like, tell me how to recover.
How do I get better?
How do I get better, heal, recover, and move on from this like demon in my life?
And it really is kind of a moving on, isn't it? You know, I mean, in some ways, at least for me, I felt like, you know, I divorced at 53. I felt like I was starting over, and you have to kind of assent to that.
Yeah, I mean, we want to, with this podcast, right, we want to call it Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel, because we want to give the victims, who we call survivors, because really they are surviving.
They are survivors.
And survivors hope, because there is hope at the end of this. There really is. And you and I are both examples of that.
We are. So in our last podcast, I learned something new about you.
Oh, God. Do I want this aired?
You do.
Wait
probably.
a minute.
You're fine.
Okay.
So I learned that when you divorced your ex, you did not know he was a narcissist then.
That's absolutely correct.
How it's like, because you're so adept at this now, I'm like, how is that possible? But you found out. How did you discover it? And after the fact?
Yes, I discovered it because of my husband's his abuse with his ex-wife, how she was abusing him to this day. They were married for 14 years, divorced for 15, and she's still trying to financially abuse him. And she's obviously abusing the children as well. So that's how I started to learn about narcissism. I was like, the person that she's describing is not the person I'm falling in love with. There is a major disconnect. It's like Jekyll and Mr. You know, it's like that type of thing. It was so different than the person I knew. And so I was like, there's some psychology here and I need to figure it out. Around that same time, people were talking about mental health, like mental health issues. Like June was Men's Mental Health Month.
Right.
We didn't have that 22 years ago.
No.
We didn't. And so as the new generation, I mean, we talk so much about millennials or, bad or this or that. They don't know how to do this. They don't have manners. You know what? Millennials are talking about mental health.
They absolutely are.
So, because of that, I studied and I understood the psychology of narcissism and other cluster B personality disorder. I will tell you, in my practice, I also deal with a lot of other personality disorders.
I'll bet.
Like histrionics, like women have that personality disorder, like Amber Heard. She's a prime example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I learned it really 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. So here you are trying to recover from something you actually discovered after the fact.
Yes.
With respect to your divorce. In my situation, I was married for 25 years. I was in a helping profession where I'd counseled and talked to many, many people over the years, and I didn't understand what narcissistic abuse was. And I was literally sitting down praying, begging God for help, and I got distracted as I was praying, and I picked up my phone and scrolled to Facebook for just a second. And my friend posted an article, 20 diversion tactics of narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths. And I read it, and I went, whoa, like I could point to stories for every one of those things from my ex. And learned there that she was a narcissist, but it was 25 years in.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a long time. Now, okay, I've been divorced 5. You've been divorced 7, right?
No, I've been divorced close to 15.
15, that's right. So we had to figure out how to recover from all of this and to get better. And while we talk about a lot of this stuff all the time, we don't. Again, for the podcast, we don't live in these things in a lot of ways.
Well, that's not true. I mean, we live them with, like, sometimes, I do with opposing counsels.
True.
I do with sometimes, neighbors, let's say. Although I love my neighbors, I'm not saying you guys are narcissists if you're listening to this. But, we see it with, like, the person maybe, in the grocery aisle, right? Like, you're trying to get something, they're trying to, like, we see it. So, yes, in my personal life, I'm not,
You're not dealing with the old stuff so much anymore.
That's also not true, because my ex... He is like the cockroach that you try to kill. This guy keeps coming back. So for our listeners, my ex-husband is remarried, 3rd marriage, no judgment. Listen, sometimes it takes a while. You kiss a lot of frogs, and sometimes it turns out like a prince. Not in this case, though. He's remarried, also had an adulterous affair with her, got her divorced from her husband. So this is a pattern with him. Like, I'm going to get the girl that already has a husband that nobody can get, right? But I can get him. I was engaged when I met him, truth be told. So got the girl. Listen, he doesn't go for ugly girls. I'm not saying I'm the most beautiful girl, but...
Oh, come on.
Okay, fine. And so what happens is... he comes back. So he constantly tries to DM me on TikTok and Instagram saying, like, if you were just like my current wife, we would still be together.
Like, why would they do that? I mean, after so many years.
Or like he'll say, I'm in Beverly Hills. He lives in Texas. He's moved 50 times in 15 years. But I'm going to be in Beverly Hills. I'd like you to take you to dinner. And I'm like... And by the way, bring your husband. Like, he is so
like we're going to be
warped.
friends.
Yeah, like my husband's going to sit there like on a couch like you and I are and say, so this girl that you literally tried to ruin her life where she was suicidal, you want me to just like break bread with you? Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and we don't have children, so it's not like I need to ever see him again, unlike your situation. So, so I wish I knew what I know now 15 years ago, because my recovery was at a snail's pace. And I wish I knew all the things that we know now.
And, what I mean by living in it, we don't have to deal with it every single day in the same kind of way that we did when we were attached to them.
Yes.
And I have some evidences of those kinds of things in my life too, where my ex will text me and ask me to go do this or that, like, like we're friends, and we're not. In fact, I've gone complete no contact with her. I don't respond to text generally, or have any conversation with her. And I've told her that I don't want any conversation unless it's about the children. And then I've got issues with the children too, who kind of respond in some narcissistic ways to me also, which makes it difficult. And that's like having to deal with her via proxy, but it's not every day, fortunately. And by and large, I feel mostly healed, and I feel like I've gone and done some things in recovery that have been good for me, and I know you've done some of these things as well, and we're in a markedly different place than we were when we first divorced.
Yeah, I mean, I had my last therapist. I went through therapy for 7 years.
I went to the therapist too.
In this relationship, because he was constantly telling me there was something wrong with me, and I
Right.
believed him.
Yep.
Because
Same
I
here.
cared for him and I loved him, and I was like, gosh, if I'm so bad, let me go fix me, because I want to be the best wife humanly
Right,
possible
right,
for you.
right. I
And
did
so
likewise.
my last therapist though said to me, if like we were like the therapist was sitting across, like you and I are on a couch. He said to me, he said, I want to meet this person. And that changed my life, because when he came in and he starts telling me how terrible, awful I am. And listen, I've got flaws, but I'm willing to admit that, right?
Yeah.
Then the next time the therapist said, okay, I want to see her again, my patient. I want to see my patient again. So I went back, and the therapist sat me down. He goes, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm only going to tell you this once. And I was like, okay. He goes, if you don't leave him, he's going to kill you. Do you understand what I'm telling you? And I was like, he goes, so right now we're going to sit and we're going to discuss where you can move to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't know if you know this. I'm a successful lawyer. By then I was a lawyer for 10 years. I was like, I'm a successful lawyer with a practice in LA. Like, what do you mean? Where am I going? He's like, no. Can you go to Paris? Can you go to Georgia? Where do you like? Do you like Texas? Like, he literally was trying to
Wow.
strategize. And I said, well, I love New York. I've always wanted to be a lawyer in New York, or maybe teach at NYU or something. He's like, okay, so what I need you to do is I need you to not tell him this, and I need you to make a plan to move. So to the point where I went home that day, packed a bag, didn't tell my mom, didn't tell anybody that I loved, my family, my friends, and I took a one-way ticket to New York.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And actually what you bring up is kind of on my list of things to do to recover. First thing is to make a plan to exit in some kind of way.
Escape. I call it escape, because you never leave a narcissist. They won't let you leave.
Absolutely.
You have to escape, and I literally escaped for my life.
Yeah.
And it was 2 years later when he even found out. We filed for divorce and we did all that stuff, but I couldn't close the case. There was a part of me living 2,400 miles away that still thought, if he changes or if I become better somehow, I'm going to get back together. That's how the trauma bond was.
Well, and that's as you described, that's kind of another thing on my list of things to do to kind of heal and recover, is to realize that this relationship will not work, and it's not going to get better. In fact, it will get worse in time, and it does not improve. Narcissists do not improve in time. They get worse in time.
Yes, and as they age, I think there's a study we can go back and let our listeners know. It's not a Harvard study, but it's one of those studies that says that as narcissists age, they get worse, not better. Because their friends, their family members fall off, right? Because they don't want to deal with the chaos that the narcissist has. So they'll start falling off, and the narcissist ends up being alone a lot of the times. I know, mine is remarried, but I genuinely believe that it's so new in their relationship, she just doesn't know. And if she knew what I know,
Yes.
there's no way she would have married him. There's just nobody would, right?
Right, absolutely.
So,
Well, oftentimes when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you have the victim who's working desperately desperately hard to try and figure out how to make this thing work. And
Desperately.
I was in that boat too. It's like I turned over every stone I could possibly turn over. I sent her to therapy. I went to therapy. And I could not figure out how to make this thing work. And I continue to try and continue to try and continue to try. Part of the process of recovering is realizing that you don't have a relationship with a narcissist that is going to work. There's not a relationship here. And let me take this one step further. Not only do you not have a relationship with a narcissist, but the harder thing to absorb is that you never really did.
Oof. Well, that's so hard. That's so, like, to this day, I mean, you're saying that, John, but, like, it's so triggering.
I'll bet.
Because, I mean, I genuinely love this person.
Same here. But the problem is, you loved him, I loved her, but we were the only ones that had love.
Correct.
And what you thought was love up front was actually pretending in order to kind of drain you of resource in some kind of way, whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally, whether it's status.
Sexually with mine.
Sexually,
yes.
Right? So it's not love up front. You know, I sat down years back, probably about 2 years before I divorced with my pastor and her, and he asked her, "Did you ever love him?" She goes, "Nah, I never really did." So
26 years with someone,
and she again, it's the rare moments of honesty, and you know, you feel like you're pinned to the wall with a dagger at that point in time. Like, not only does she not love me, but she never loved me. Would you go, why in the world would you marry somebody you don't love? But this is the truth. My ex verbalized it. I knew it, but to hear it was kind of devastating anyways. But you have to understand that you are the one who had love. They're the ones who are using you. And that the relationship you thought you had actually never existed. It was a relationship of function for them, of use, but love was not a part of that relationship and not a part of that equation.
Right. I mean, I can think back to, I was everything. I was the babysitter because he had a daughter. I was the one doing pickups and drop-offs. He would never do them. Mm-hmm. Never. When I say never, he never showed up for that
like
little girl. 0 times. I was taking her to church twice a week. I was writing the spousal support and child support checks to his ex. I was doing everything, like financially. Oh, you want a 7 Series car, but you don't have a job? No problem. I'll get it for you.
Yep.
Like everything and anything. Even my family back in the day, we lived very close, like 10 minutes away. I couldn't even go see my dad. Like that when my dad ended up in the hospital for the final time, I literally begged him. I was like, I will buy you anything. I will buy you a watch. He was sexually deviant. I was like, I'll go do whatever you want sexually. If you come to the hospital to see my father, and his thing was like being with other men. So it was like, that was the extent of it, right? It wasn't like, let me wear a maid outfit for you. It wasn't like that. That would have been like, just kinky, right?
Right.
It was like, I will do anything possible for you to come visit my father because he's asking about you. And so when he came to the hospital finally, my dad's like, oh, you know, you're here, blah, 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 blah. My father said, will you pray for me? And then my father said, when I'm gone, will you take care of my daughter?
Oh my God.
And he's like, yes, I will. And I just sat there going, this is costing me like so much, right?
Yeah.
And he walked out of there and he was like, yeah, you know, your dad's saved now. You know, I showed up and I'm the savior. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what is this going to cost me? And it did. It cost me greatly because later on sexually what I had to do for him to keep him, to keep our marriage, this facade, like you're saying, that didn't really, it wasn't a marriage. It wasn't one-on-one like communication, or I mean, it's hard to adjust to. It is hard to adjust to the fact that you did not really ever have a relationship with somebody that you genuinely loved. It was a one-way relationship. If you have love for the person, I used to tell my ex all the time, you know, if I brought a situation to her and had a conversation, whatever I got back was the opposite of relationship.
was the opposite of what should be said. It was the opposite of kind. I'm like, I'm in opposite world, right? I'm looking for compassion, I get rage. I'm looking for kindness, I get anger. And it was always the opposite of what a friend, a loving friend, would do.
Right.
And you look, and now we have perspective, some, because we've been out of those relationships for such a long time. But to adjust to the fact that you never really had a relationship with these people is very hard.
Right. So when we're talking about recovery, I mean, don't do it what I did, right? I left everybody that I loved, moved to New York, and really was bi-coastal for 13 years. That's how I taught at NYU, and I went on to do other things, and had to practice, obviously, still here in California, but it was difficult. It was not easy, and my mom would say to me, like, how long are you going to punish yourself? Because I was literally punishing myself, and it really wasn't until I met my husband, which was years later, that I was like, wow, okay, I think I can forgive myself, for the things I had to do to keep this person. Yeah. And really made an idol of him. Like he was before everybody else, before God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. He was the first. He was the idol. And so I had to forgive myself for that as well and ask God for forgiveness. But the recovery really was moving away. Exercise. I did a lot of exercise. I had to.
Let's talk about the moving away piece for a second, because I mean ultimately the only way to deal with a narcissist is to disconnect.
Yes.
There's no rationalizing with this person. There's no negotiating with this person. Healthy relationships, there's negotiation. I think negotiation is happening all the time because it matters to you, it matters to me.
Yes.
And that never takes place with a narcissist, because what matters to you doesn't matter to me. What matters to me, and what matters to you, I don't care about. And you can't ever have a relationship with somebody like that. And if you don't have a relationship with somebody like that, you realize you didn't have a relationship with somebody like that. You're not going to have a relationship with somebody like that. The only solution is to disconnect. And your therapist told you to go pack up and head to New York, which you did, but that was, as much as it was extreme, it was also right.
Right, I had to.
You had to disconnect. And there are people out there, well, how do I disconnect? I can't leave right now. There are different levels of disconnection. There's something we call gray rock. And in gray rock, you're basically emotionally disconnecting from somebody. I oftentimes, at least when I got to this point in my marriage, it was one-word answers. You going out? Yes. Where are you going? Out. And you have to kind of disconnect from this person emotionally, and you wind up just kind of giving them passionless and very, very dispassionate responses instead of responses that have any kind of emotion whatsoever, because emotion fuels them. So you're trying to kind of remove their authority, remove their control. And when you respond dispassionately, they realize they have no control over you. I started to do that, and my ex asked me to leave 3 weeks later. She's like, you can get out. And I'm like, oh no, my name's on the deed of that house, but there's the door. You're welcome to go if you like. And we were beginning to have these conversations, but it was because I had to just completely and totally, particularly those last 2 years, emotionally disconnect. And during those 2 years, like you went home, packed a bag, and left. Bought yourself a one-way ticket. It took me 2 years. I had to make a plan to get out, which I was uncertain whether I was going to go execute, but I started and did that for a couple of years. And then when the time was right, 2 years in, I said, okay, I need a divorce. And I began to execute that plan.
Right. And a lot of clients, like, they'll come to me for a strategy session because we talk about that on our social media.
Right.
Like, just come in for a consultation. I do it via Zoom. Let's figure out what your next move is, because remember that narcissists are very crafty. They're like serpents.
Yeah.
This is a biblical perspective, but they're like serpents. So they're very crafty in the way that they think. And they're always thinking like 100 or, more.
And they'll
steps
always
ahead.
do the unexpected.
Right.
Like the thing you think they would absolutely never go do, they
Right.
will do.
Right.
They will
So
constantly surprise you.
I'll set up a strategy session with them and figure out sort of like when you should leave. Should you wait to, like if you have children, obviously you can't just pack up a bag and leave.
Yep.
I was blessed that I didn't have a child with this person, or else I'd be stuck in California permanently. But what happens is I'll say, like, should we wait until the children get out of school in the summer? That's why January and June are divorce months.
Interesting.
And so, like, are they out of school? Okay. Sometimes a client will say, they'll file and they're like, don't serve the person until a certain thing happens.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. Unfortunately, in Orange County, once you file, it's still, they do it, they don't do it through the system. They do it like by hand. And so it takes like a week or two. So you're filing for divorce and you won't get that document back for like sometimes a week or two.
Wow.
And so during that time, right, you're like strategizing and then you get it back and then you have to serve the person. So that starts the 6-month waiting period in California because we have a waiting period.
Yeah.
So it's called cooling off period.
Yeah.
And so, and you're just thinking
Or
like,
get
I got
the hell out period is what it is.
Right? So that's what we do because we deal with high conflict narcissistic divorces, really strategize and think about it and say, this is the strategy, but they're going to go left anyway. They're going to go right. They're going to do what is unthinkable.
And interestingly enough, also at the same time, if you're still in a relationship with these people, something we talked about on one of the other podcasts, I think with Eddie, we talked about actually doing what you need to do to try and save the thing in some respects, or to at least get your narcissist help, so that when you leave, you have peace.
Right. So, with Bill Eddy, he was saying that, I think it was in this season 2, season 3, he was saying that some people want to do everything possible so that when they leave, they don't feel guilt. Because as a survivor, you do have guilt.
No question.
And so you've acted like this person's savior, right? Like you're saving them. You're going to fix their childhood wound. They're not so bad. You've been lying about them to your family and friends. And so his point was like, if you are going to go to therapy just for yourself, even.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, I did that too, by the way, for many years.
Yeah, and likewise for me, I brought my ex to different places to try to get her help. I went to a multitude of therapists with her to try to get her help. I actually dialed in on a therapist who just worked with narcissists to try and get her help, and every last bit of it she refused. Now, did it save my marriage? Oh, hell no. Did it help me in any kind of way to deal with her? Not a whole lot. Does it give me peace today, now that I'm out? Oh, yes, it does. Okay, I know every time I lay my head down to the pillow at night that I did everything humanly possible to try and help her. And there is a ton of peace in that. Now, that being said, somebody could get lost in doing all of these things trying to get their narcissist help. Will they change? No, it's not going to happen. But there is peace for you in making an effort to know that on the other end of it, when it's done, that you've done everything possible to try and make it work. There's a balance in that, because I do think that you could spend decades in trying to get somebody help, and by and large, let's be clear, narcissists don't want help. They don't want to acknowledge a problem. They don't want to acknowledge they're part of the problem. I can remember sitting with one of the therapists who was a Christian therapist, and you'd think they'd counsel you away from divorce, and the therapist looked at me and said, "Yeah, I just think you need to leave her." And she sat back very quietly for a moment, and then ultimately said, am I the cause of all of this? And the therapist is like, yes, this is what people divorce over. And now, did that change anything? No, not a bit. Told her what should take place, told her what was going to take place, and it didn't matter. But again, if doing these kinds of things on the far side, even though they didn't help me in relationship with her, they helped me personally. And it was an important part of my recovery because I could say on the other side of it, I did everything I could for her. And I believe that and know that in my heart to this day, that I did everything I could to try and make it work. And that's the peace part of it. So if you go to do some of these things, I'm telling you right now, don't expect change.
Correct. I agree with that.
But at the same time, it is peace for you personally on the other side of it because the relationship is going to end whether you like it or not.
Right. And I want to say one thing, and this is the reality of it. And I feel like I had this idea came to me when I was thinking about our podcast. The narcissist does not want to change. Like,
Zero.
I was trying to have my husband be this, like, church-going man that he said he was, used to have a youth group. Don't you want to be that great guy again? Don't you want people to look up to you? Don't you want God to be pleased with you? Well, he's not when you're cheating and lying and manipulating and ripping people off. He didn't want to be that person. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So when you say, like, you're lying, they could give a shit that they're lying. Mm-hmm. They're like, okay. Because they don't have the conscience that you and I have.
They don't even know. At some level, they didn't even realize they're lying or care about it.
That's what I'm saying.
They just don't care.
So when you go to therapy and you're like you did, you're like, don't you want to change? Like, this is what... They don't. They're really happy with who they are, and they're very, like, boastful about it, too. Mm-hmm. Like, ha, ha, ha. Like, why? You're not going to leave. They're on one hand, they think that you're going to leave them because they've got abandonment issues. On the other hand, they think that you're so trauma bonded that you won't. And their ego says, like, she's never going to leave. Right. Like, literally, I was 35 when I left him. He said, who would want you? You're old and you are a divorce attorney. Like, who would want you? You're too old. Like, you've passed your prime. And I really felt that way. And then finally I said, you know what? Even if nobody wants me, I'm going to choose me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say that because that would have been a war of, magnitude, World War III, 4, 5, and 6. I just said to myself, I'm going to choose me.
So by and large, the people who are in narcissistic relationships, we call them empaths a lot of times. They're very empathetic people. They're very compassionate people. They're also people who are the opposite of self-centered. So to be in a place where you choose you, as you're saying,
so foreign.
It is foreign. Like it is opposite of the way you naturally operate. So to make that decision for somebody who's empathetic and who pretty naturally puts other people's needs before their own is a ridiculously difficult decision or realization or action to have to assent to. Same thing for me. When I married, it ceased to be John and it began to be us. Myself and her. That us was what I was most concerned about, and in most situations, her. Because I knew that we couldn't have a healthy marriage until she was healthy.
100%.
So that was part of my trying to get her help, and to have to go and emotionally withdraw, which is kind of self-preservation. It's a decision about self, and a decision to have to go divorce, which is also a decision about self. You're saying save yourself. That can be ridiculously hard for people who are empathetic and who consider other people's needs first. But you did it because you had to.
Yes.
There was no other choice. And this is part of the recovery process too, particularly for empathetic people. You have to realize in these places that there is a point in time and there is a place in time where you have to care about you. And it's not selfish to do that. It's necessary.
Yes, because really, if you stay with them, it's like you're either going to lose yourself. You've already lost yourself in the marriage.
Totally.
And then you're going to be either suicidal. You're going to either commit suicide, because we know people that have committed suicide.
We
You and
do.
I, that have reached out to us through our social media, and so it's not a good life for you, right?
No.
To stay with them, and then you realize, on the other hand, they don't want to change because they're happy being, demons. So you're like, okay, well, that demon's happy to be themselves, and I need to make a change for myself. And so, like we've said this before, find somebody that you can talk to, make a
Yep.
strategy session, maybe with a divorce attorney or even with your close confidant, and then just put, like, literally, I would tell myself, today when I wake up, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and that's all I've got. I don't have more than that. I would show up at my therapist's office in Uggs and my pajamas. Now, remember, I was a successful attorney back then, and this is how I was showing up, because that's all I could do.
Right.
And so, that man actually saved my life. I mean, Jesus has saved my life, obviously, but that therapist saved my life, and he's actually helped a lot of people I know get out of abusive marriages and relationships, and he passed away 2 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
So
that.
yeah, so Dr. Shamsian, he's in heaven because he's helped so many people with addiction. He also helps people with addiction, get out of this very abusive and toxic marriage.
Yeah. There are different levels kind of people you want to converse with in this whole process of recovery. And I think having other people involved with you is a really important component to recovering. And for me, there were a couple different levels. One is what you described here, which is a therapist or a coach. And ultimately, I would tell you, like the first therapist I saw, he helped me and he didn't even realize it. In fact, I didn't acknowledge it at the time. Very early on, about probably 10 years before I divorced, this was just after my ex had told me she had an obsession with an ex-boyfriend, and then was pretending she didn't have the obsession and didn't say it, and none of this stuff happened. And I can remember I wasn't living in Atlanta at the time, and I'd just moved back with the family, and I met with this guy, and after 2 or 3, maybe 5 sessions, he said to me, one of 3 things is going to happen. I said, okay. And he said, you will either divorce her now, you'll divorce her later, or you will find different corners of the house to live in and figure some way to cohabitate. And I stood up and I said, I don't want any of those. I want secret answer number 4, which is happily ever after, because I'd not given up hope.
Right.
I'd thought, okay, this is workable, and it wasn't workable. And when we got to that point, I said, I guess we're done, because I don't want the solutions you're giving me. And I stopped seeing him. And he was so right. It just took me another 10 years to figure it out. Those were my options: divorce her now, divorce her later, or find some corners of the house to go live in. And quite honestly, that house was not big enough for the both of us, which left me with option number 1 and option number 2. And I had to divorce her, and divorced her later after the kids were out. And then later on, as I divorced and began to get through the process, particularly the last 2 years of our marriage, I went and saw a therapist who specialized in abuse and particularly men who were abused by narcissists. That was helpful, and kind of transitioned from her, and she was amazing, to another therapist I felt like I'd connected with a little bit better, and who I still see to this day from time to time. In fact, I saw her last week, because I was struggling to negotiate in my head with some of the issues with respect to the narcissistic abuse that comes through my children. And I still have these conversations with therapists from time to time, and they can be abundantly helpful in the recovery process. So I would encourage you to go do that. Do I think there's a lot of value in you taking your narcissist with you? 0. None of those sessions that was just pissing money away is really all it was. The other level of conversation that I think was helpful in recovery was conversation with friends.
Yes, that was helpful. Although, it has to be friends that have sort of gone through a narcissistic, right? Because most people do not understand this because remember, this is a disorder.
It is a personality disorder.
If you say something like this to a girlfriend and they've never been with somebody that's been narcissistic, they cannot relate to you. They'll say, well, just do this, or maybe you, like I know with women, maybe you need to sleep with him more. And you're like, girl, like he's not even interested in
that's
me.
the kind of advice I got as well from some people. It's well meaning.
Yes.
But it's trite. Because it doesn't acknowledge the reality of the situation. Going and having sex with somebody is not going to go fix it. Going and being nice, and I got the same advice.
You got
go
that
home,
advice?
Yeah, from a pastor friend. Go home, make love to your wife, and like that's going to fix it. And like that's what she wants anyways. Are you out of your mind? That's the last thing on her mind, and that's the last thing that'll fix our relationship. So when you describe these kinds of things, people who are friends, and again, perhaps well-meaning even in some of it, they don't understand.
Right. Well, now there's so many resources, right? I mean, not to plug our podcast, but there's so many resources like podcasts, there's books, there's so many books. We know, YouTube videos, all the things that wasn't there for me 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy to be a part of this community of people that, believe the victim survivor and, really just listen and try to involve yourself in this community and ask questions. And, John is obviously you do coaching for men and women.
And that's actually where I think coaching can be actually more effective than therapy, because the coaches you deal with have been through this personally.
Correct.
They absolutely know the distance that you've traveled in some capacity and are naturally empathetic too at the same time. So oftentimes they're the best people to go communicate with.
Yeah, so it's great that, we do have a community and that survivors do have a community. I wish I knew. I wish 15 years ago I was a little bit less hard on myself and, but it took 2 years. It took 2 years to finally realize, like, I got to let this go, and I can't carry this guilt.
One of the things I think, as I was pondering our conversation today, and the value of relationships in helping you heal, I found also that through the recovery process that you will be surprised. You'll be surprised who your friends are on the other end of it.
Oh, 100%. Are you kidding me? Yes, absolutely.
There are people you think will stand with you who will go, that can't be happening, and who will think you crazy and discard you. People you thought were wingmen and friends, and I had a guy from my church who I would consider a dear friend, and we'd play Words with Friends all the time on our phones, and found out I was divorcing, cut me loose. Never had a conversation, and I would have expected him to have been more empathetic, or at least to have heard what was going on. He didn't do that. And there will be others who flat out discard you and don't stand with you because it's a divorce or for other reasons. Then there will be that group of people who find out, who do nothing but draw in close to you.
You had a group?
I did.
Oh my gosh, you were blessed.
I was.
You were
still
blessed.
am with those same people. And so and it's not a large group of people. By and large, we're just talking about a handful of folks who I felt like really stood with me. My family abandoned me in it and took me in as their family. And so I'm not absent of family. Is it different? Absolutely. But there are people that stood with me through this whole thing that just love me, and you will be surprised who stands with you and who doesn't.
Right. And even if it's one person, right? For me, it was just my mom who believed in me and said, I don't recognize who my daughter is anymore because I was a shell of myself. And then when I went to New York after I was there for a couple weeks, I finally called her and I said, you got to come. I got to fly you out to New York. I think I'm going to be staying here and getting an apartment and being bi-coastal. And she came, and my mom is the cutest person. And, you've seen pictures of her, but you've never met her in person. She's like 5'2", all wisdom. And she came and she helped me get my apartment and furniture and all this stuff. But I was like in a studio apartment. Like here I'd gone from a penthouse, right?
Right.
In Studio City, actually, where we were for our podcast launch party. I was living in Studio City in a penthouse, beautiful cars, the whole thing. And here I was like in New York City in a studio. But you know what she said to me? She goes, "Do you have peace?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That was worth it, because
Absolutely.
everything else you'll get later again if you want it, but your peace was expensive." And she's like, "Your peace was expensive, and you didn't listen to me about this guy." And I said, I
Wow.
didn't listen to you. I didn't listen to Dad. I didn't listen to my brothers. I go, "But can we not ruminate on that? Because I already feel bad that I didn't listen to the people that loved me." And she said, "Yeah." And that was it, you know.
Wow.
But it took 2 years of, and again, we did not have children. So when people have children, it just takes longer because, like you said, you have to deal with them, right? You can't really block her because God forbid something happens with your child and she needs to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a group of people out there who just can't financially afford to leave. You know, I couldn't have afforded, with 4 children. There's no way I could have left while all 4 of the kids were in the house. All of my money would have gone to child support, and I'd have been destitute myself. So it's just not possible. That's why sometimes these plans that people have to make and execute, they take time, and mine took time as well. But as you know, you talk about your mom. It's like the value of having somebody in your life, even just one person that believes you, that you can communicate with, is just tremendous and helpful in your recovery. Now, that being said, there are a group of people out there who would love to just kind of go from one relationship to another.
Yeah, I don't recommend that. I know as the victim survivor, you want to do that because you know that they're going to be doing that. The narcissist is always on. Listen, they're not finished with the divorce. They've already moved on.
Yep.
Actually, they've always had someone else because they consider it supply. So it doesn't mean that they're having meaningful relationships with other people. It's just like a form of supply. So they have to have at least like a couple out there. So before they even leave the relationship with you, they're already started. So that is sort of the tendency, is to kind of, for yourself, to like go into the next relationship. But you have to be careful because you have to see your part in it. There is a part of you that chose this person. Now,
Yeah.
were you fooled? Did you fall for the love bombing? Yes, but why? Why did you feel that you needed that love bombing? You know, so if somebody's coming on too strong or wants to move in with you or have you move in with them, you got to just say no.
Yeah. You know, interesting. You're talking about a process here of kind of self-discovery, trying to figure out why you were attached to a narcissist, what drew you to the narcissist, what kept you in relationship with a narcissist, and trying to determine these kinds of things. A lot of them will wind up being kind of the result of your family of origin. You'll find probably that at the root of a lot of these kinds of things. But if you jump like out of a relationship and just into the next one, I'm telling you, you are destined to kind of repeat the same kind of situation. And that's problematic. The only thing worse than having to deal with one narcissist is having to deal with 2. And if you put yourself in a position where you've not taken the time to discover, you're just being unwise. And I'll make this statement. The people I've seen and have known over the years through coaching and conversation, particularly on social media, those that run from a relationship with a narcissist right into another find a narcissist the second time around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, for me, it took 8 years. 8 years of being, 7 years married, 8 years of being single. Not that I didn't date, but I didn't trust my own judgment that I wasn't going to pick another person like him because something about that was very attractive.
And that's actually, I think, the healthy disposition, that I don't trust my own judgment.
Yes.
That's the healthy disposition as you're seeking to recover, I think, because you need to understand what it was about you that at some level sought a person like that out, at some level stayed with a person like that, and put up with it and allowed your own self to be kind of beat down through the process and continuing in that relationship. I know for me personally, I discovered a lot about my family of origin and how they operate. You know, my cousin said to me one time, she goes, "Do you realize that I think there were 7 of us cousins, 6 of us married people who were relatively narcissistic?" And I went, "No, I did not realize that's a real insight." And I went back and kind of traced through it, and sure enough, that's a reality. And some of that stuff came out of my family of origin, and I see that stuff very clearly now, how I put up with that kind of stuff. And the people I engage right now and are close to won't allow that kind of stuff for me. They don't treat me that way, and they know my history as well, and would not ever allow for those kinds of things for me, which I'm grateful for. They're very protective of me. So for us, having gone through it and putting ourselves in a place of recovery, is also understanding that in some respects I'm a dummy and I don't know what's best for me. And until I discover some of these things, I really can't trust my own insight with respect to significant relationships like that.
Yes, but recovery is possible. I mean, I am a result of that. You are a result of that. I mean, I remarried. It took 8 years, but I have a great marriage. We dated for 3 years. I got to meet his family. Met his children. Obviously, he's got 3 boys, and so wanted my mom to meet him, and she did during COVID, actually. So, met him, got to ask a lot of hard questions to him because, him having gone through a narcissistic marriage with three boys. Her daughter having gone through that with no children, she really had some hard questions for him. And it was interesting because my oldest brother that was there, we were all kind of talking and having Persian tea, and my brother's like, "Mom, do you have any more questions?" And she's like, "No." And my oldest brother's like thinking he's like at the Spanish interrogation, right?
Spanish Inquisition,
Spanish Inquisition. She's like, "Really?" Like, I thought, she's like, "Well, he's being honest and he's being genuine and he's telling me his story himself. So I don't need to ask him anything because he's not leaving anything out."
Yeah.
And so my husband is great because he doesn't blame the mother of his children. He says, I was in a vulnerable time. He had just gotten a job at Goldman Sachs. He's very proud to tell you that if you meet him. And so he was like, I just didn't know. I was like, okay, it's time to get married. And she had been married before, 5 years older, and she knew sort of what she was doing. And so he's like, look, I just thought, okay, this is the right thing to do. And honorable men do that, right? And so he's like, I'll just, okay, she's great. She's, blah, blah, blah. And comes from a big family, all the things that he values now in our relationship. And so he just, but he told her the story so she didn't have to ask questions. So he's like, this was my fault for not digging in deeper. And, and my mom's like, okay, is there anything else? And he's like, yeah, can I have your blessing? And my mom's like, yes. And without any hesitation. And he is the only man she's ever loved, and for me, and I'm 50 now.
So you've taken it to another level, okay? So you've not only had you've been to therapy, and you've had therapists who've helped you significantly. You have other people in your life, like your mother, who's helped you significantly, but you took it one step further, and you allowed those people you trust to evaluate your new relationship.
Yes. And that was really hard. That was really hard because usually, I'm a lawyer, right? I feel like I got this handled, right? I don't want to give up that control necessarily, right. But I had to say, no, I want my family. I want my mom, my brother, my sister, who, you've met several
she's
times.
Amazing.
Thank you. My sister is amazing.
And you know what? It's so evident you just adore her.
I do. I was on the way here actually today, and I texted her, and I was like, she's at work, and I was like, I just want to tell you how much I love you and thank you for showing up.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful.
She didn't have to. She didn't have to come to our launch party. What is she getting out of it? But just to be there. So, yes, I let them sort of evaluate him, and that's important. If you don't, have parents, make sure your friends are doing it, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to have people evaluate the person you're with, because if they're genuine, your friends are going to be, hopefully you've got good friends, right? Are going to be happy for you and say, yeah, absolutely.
Interestingly enough, some of my friends later, after the ones I trusted who knew my ex, would go, when they saw us, they're like, what? One of my buddies said, it's like, I couldn't ever have pictured you together. And sure enough, I didn't see that up front. And I wish I'd had somebody kind of speak some truth to me earlier on, and perhaps this all could have been avoided, and this 27-year heartache. So to go and have the people around you who trust you, or who you trust, to go and evaluate a new potential relationship, especially when you've embraced the fact that, okay, perhaps I'm not so good at choosing, is a healthy thing.
Well, I would also say don't beat yourself up, because before I got married, my brothers, which they never opined on anyone I ever dated, they sat me down and said, do not marry this person. Like, if you're just trying to have fun and stuff, that's great, but do not marry this person. This person's not marriage material.
Wow.
And even my father, who was alive at the time, said, do not marry him. So don't worry. Even if you got that advice, you're so trauma bonded to them that you're like, what are you talking about? Like, even the people that you trust the most. So just be careful with that, because I want our listeners to know, I want our listeners to know, that's why it's important to, not give your heart away so easily.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. So lots of things we've discussed here. We hope they're helpful to you in your recovery. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Narc.podcast is our podcast channel on Instagram. If you want to reach Padideh, you can reach her at Jafari Legal on Instagram. And I'm Male Victims of Female Narcissists on Instagram as well. Our PM boxes are always open to questions. I do coaching as well, and Padideh is an attorney in real life. So if you need either of us to go help you, we can help you there too. Other than that, it'll be until our next time. And unfortunately, it's not going to be face-to-face like this. So I wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed being with you in studio. It's just spectacular. So
thank you so much. High five.
High five. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for listening to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit www.narcissistabuserecoverychannel.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle narc.podcast. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. The co-hosts are not licensed therapists. Seek professional help, as information is often state-specific. The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel is produced in studios in California and Georgia.